I don't know how many people were in the last session, but in the last session we were mapping out a customer journey map of a first-time buyer, from sort of deciding to buy right through to moving in. So we thought today we would sort of build on that a little bit and use some other common templates that are used in product. And we're going to look at the customer through a bit more of like a specific lens, as if we're like a property portal. So like one of those searchable marketplaces that you can use to view all of like the active listings and stuff. So like the likes of Rightmove or Zoopla. Or well, I mean, in my head it was Property Pal, but apparently that's just a Northern Ireland thing, which I just found out. So yeah, so let me share my screen. We've got a little Miro board going.
Lauren, just while you're doing that, for the people on the call, who's used customer journey maps before? We've got like a collective, like, yeah, no. It's worth having a look, right? Because no matter what you do, the whole point is you understand what your customers try and do, like the highlight activities, the in-depth detail, then basically the pains and the goals and things like that, and then you map them on a nice like up and down sort of. Sam's had enough. Basically you map them on up and down, like happy, sad, everything else. So if you haven't seen those before, go and have a look at our last session. That's on I think it's on the networks itself. It was recorded, but we take you through that. We use the example of property just because most people are probably familiar with that across the world. There's nuances, but that whole idea is trying to keep it simple. But go and have a look, because that will lead into how we do some of these things today as well, that Renata and Lauren are going to take us through.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll start to see some of how we've sort of took the pain points and the gains and stuff from the customer journey map into the profile, and then into test and learn card as well, which Renata is going to bring us through. So yeah, happy to get started. Anything else to add?
I'll just add if I think about something.
Perfect. Can we see the Miro board okay? I'm going to zoom in a second, but can we see it? Perfect. So yeah, I mean, has anyone used a customer profile before? I know we just said about customer journey maps, but has anyone used a customer profile before? Some people.
Can I just ask, what are your roles as you sit here on this within the whole product thing, just so we know who we're talking to in terms of that?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm currently an IT service manager at the National Trust, although my job title doesn't quite align. I think there is some overlap with kind of a service/product operation-y type space. But I have an interest in potentially a future career within the world of products. So just wanting to better understand the role and tools and resources, etc. Thanks.
That's perfect. Sam, I think you're next on my screen, so.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm a product owner at a technology company, CGI. Predominantly been in the background previously with respect to building product, but I'm keen on getting closer to customers as well. So yeah,
perfect. This will be really good. Steph, if you were able to come off mute, what's your role in all of this?
Hi, yeah, sorry, I'm having a problem with my camera. So I'm fairly new to product management. But I work for a kind of small streaming company, but at the moment I'm kind of looking after a refresh for a website with the view to perhaps getting involved in some other areas as well. So yeah, I'm just kind of trying to learn as much as I can, really.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Karina, not last on me screen across.
Last but not least, as they say. So my job is Agile Delivery Manager, and I look after service delivery teams, but also product teams. Perfect. And because we run quite a lean enterprise in here, I tend to have my fingers in also things, including product.
Perfect. I think this is going to be a decent session, and because this is a really good asset to use to try and understand those customers. So maybe something you can take away at the end of this and try and model some of the customers you see in front of you. Lauren, over to you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, so I think this will be good then to run through quickly, just sort of like an overview of what customer profiles actually are, just as a very quick summary. So customer profiles, so they sort of just help you build a shared understanding for who you're actually designing for, who your users are. And they cover things like the customer's jobs to be done. So what are they actually trying to achieve? their gains. So what are the benefits or positive outcomes that they're looking for as they're using your product or service, and then pains, so like anything that's getting in the way for them. Some of it will be backed up by customer research if you have it. So if you have interviews, surveys, support tickets, all that sort of stuff. But a lot of the time is based on assumptions and just sort of filling in the gaps if you don't quite have the data for some of those things. And it's just sort of based on what the team believes to be true about the customer. But obviously, it's always best to have that research to back it up as well. One of the things that is important for customer profiling is segmentation. So as we said, we're going to be looking at this specific customer profiles through the lens of a property portal site. They're going to have many different users. This is just a few listed here. So the likes of maybe an existing homeowner, an estate agent, first-time buyer, property investor. But already they're going to have so many different needs and pains from each other. Like a first-time buyer is going to be very different to what an estate agent needs whenever they come to the site. So you can see already why that's so important to actually split those up into multiple customer profiles rather than just one. Because if you had just one, it's going to be very broad and it probably won't actually be useful for anyone. So that's why it's important just to build it for one segment at a time. And yeah, today we're going to be focusing on the first-time buyer, as that's what we went through with the customer journey map last time. So you'll see how that sort of connects through together.
Lauren, just one point on that. For anybody who's in a big company, this is probably more important because people have very similar titles. If you think like supply chain manager, right, that doesn't mean they're the same customer segment, because you might have a supply chain manager right across here or in a different country that has very different challenges to what this one does here. So you need to find a way of making sure they're separate, because despite the titles being the same and potentially the job description, the underneath of what they're trying to achieve might be very different. So again, think about that and don't just go, oh, it's this. It's something that is common that we see in some of the bigger companies because they just go off titles, and that's not the best way to look at this. There you go, Lauren, sorry.
Great. Yeah, so when should we use customer profiles then? So very early in discovery is probably the best time of when you should use it. So before you've actually committed to any type of solution, maybe you're exploring a new feature or product area, or if your team just needs to align on who you're actually building for. So if you were to ask your team, okay, who are our customers? What are their needs? What are the different types of customers? What are their pain points? And if that question can't really be answered, or everyone has different answers or different views, then that's a good time to maybe create a few customer profiles and align with your team on that sort of stuff. They're not also always useful to use as well. So there's a few scenarios where you wouldn't necessarily use a customer profile, and you would maybe use a different type of template. So if you already have strong validated research and a profile would just sort of repeat it, it's not really useful if you aren't getting any new information out of it. It shouldn't really be used as like a one-off exercise either, that's sort of created once and then never revisited. This is probably one of the most common misuses for it. People just sort of use it as like a checkbox exercise, and then they don't build on it as they're finding out more research, and it just gets out of date very quickly. And then the last one there is just for any minor or low risk decisions where like the effort of creating a profile isn't worth it, or if you don't really require a deep understanding of the customer in that specific decision. So for example, like if you're just changing the color of a button on your website, you don't necessarily need to create a full customer profile for it. It would be a little bit overkill of like something that's very small and reversible, and instead like a simple like A/B test or something would be sufficient enough for that. So yeah, that's sort of some examples of when to use it and when not to use it. And then lastly, some top tips for customer profiles then. So obviously the number one thing is to speak to your users. That's going to be the best source of truth when finding out more things about your customers and their needs and pain points. So obviously it's not always possible, but if you do get the opportunity to do so, that's your number one thing of going to speaking directly to your users. Don't build it alone. So even if it's not possible to speak to your customers, you still shouldn't build it completely on your own. You can get your whole team's perspective on it. Even better if it's with customer-facing people on your team, like people in sales, support, maybe UX designers that have had interviews previously with customers. So yeah, very important. And then, yeah, as I've mentioned as well, regularly go back and revisit it. Don't let it go stale. If there is more research coming in, continuously update it. It's only useful if it sort of reflects what you currently know about your customer, and that's going to be changing all the time, every single day. So yeah, that's why it's important to update it. And then it's also important to sort of mark down on your customer profile as well, which parts of it are backed up by real evidence versus what is just assumptions. So even if you're just like color coding it or just labeling it, it sort of helps you highlight the specific areas on the profile where you maybe need to test a little bit more, you need to do a bit more research, or maybe you're just making assumptions because the research hasn't been done yet. But yeah, very important to mark down those things. And then it makes it obvious of where you need to test, and then perhaps using test and learn cards and stuff, which we'll discuss in a bit. So yeah, that's a very quick summary. Anything else to add, Matt, before we
I'm
move
just
on?
going to ask a question to the group. How many people here actually get to talk to the end customer rather than a set of proxies through that and be told this is what your customer wants?
In my space, it's not really direct as such, although we could set up forums if we wanted to. But we have set up like feedback mechanisms, so at least we can get feedback on what is and isn't working, and then utilize some of that feedback.
Yeah, perfect.
And I think you're right. It depends on the project as well, because in other products that I've been looking at, it's very much you're behind the scenes and you've got service and account teams telling you what the customer wants. I was lucky to talk directly to a customer on one project, which was a new product that, I was seen as the SME, so I was given the chance to speak to the customer. But yeah, it's a little bit dependent, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Go on, Lauren.
Okay, so this is the blank template that we have of the customer profile, just to sort of show what that looks like. There is another version that you can use, which is more like value proposition canvas, which we can go through further in another session if it's useful, but it just sort of builds on the customer profile as well. So it's got the similar stuff of like your customer jobs, pains and gains, but then it also goes into gain creators. So like how your product is sort of fulfilling that and how it's relieving the pain of the certain things that you find. So yeah, that's another version.
I like that one as well, Lauren, because you can map directly onto it. So the thing I've done in the past is you draw lines from your pain to your pain relievers and things like that to see what features are actually going to drive that, and then you can start a prioritization of your feature map to see what you're going to do first.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas like this customer profile that we're using today, it's more for like building empathy and understanding of your customers, and it doesn't quite go into the solution space yet, or like what you currently have to solve these things in your product. But yeah, you can see down the left-hand side, you would just sort of have generic picture of like a hypothetical customer. You can put their name, a description about them just to sort of bring it to life a little bit more. One very important part is the version number and then the date as well, just so that you know when it was last updated. So if you were to come across a customer profile that you know is currently being used and referred to, but say it was updated a few years ago, that's something to flag then and see if there's been any research or updates done since then, because your customer is going to be changing all the time. So we're going to go through a filled in example that we've done over here. So down the left-hand side again, we've got the name. So we've got Sarah, who's a first-time buyer, and she is this is her first time using a property search site, so very new to everything. And then we've just got the version down here as well. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side with your jobs to be done. So again, this is just sort of what the customer is actually trying to achieve as they're using your product. it's split up into functional, social, and then personal / emotional jobs to be done. So starting off with the functional jobs to be done. So these are just like the practical tasks that the user is trying to get done whenever they come to your product or service. So with this example, we've got finding properties within her budget, trying to get a better understanding of the buying process step by step. Obviously, as a first-time buyer, that's one of the main things that they would be figuring out. And then also finding properties in the desired location. Obviously, these are just maybe not even top 3, but just a few different examples. But if you were filling this out, you can have as many as you want, really. We've then got our social job done. So this is just sort of how the user wants to be seen by other people as they're using your product or service. So maybe they would want to feel educated and not appear out of their depth in front of estate agents and sort of be taken seriously. That would be a social job to be done as a first-time buyer. Maybe feeling responsible in front of their family, and then just being taken seriously in general whenever they're making offers and stuff like that as a first-time buyer. And then we have personal and emotional jobs to be done. So this is sort of how the user wants to be feeling as they're interacting with your product or service. And in this example, they would want to feel confident in their decisions, feel excited about taking the next step rather than sort of feeling a bit overwhelmed and stressed, which it definitely can be, and then feeling in control of an overwhelming process. And you can sort of start to see where opportunities might come out of this, where if you were this company and you were finding out all these things about your customer, you can see where the opportunities can start to come and where you can improve their experience and make them feel these more positive emotions. In the middle then, we've got our gains, and this is split into required, desired, expected, and unexpected gains. So the required gains, so these are sort of the basics of what the user is going to expect whenever they come to this website. And without it, the whole experience would just sort of fall apart and it wouldn't really be useful at all for them. So the required gains in this scenario would be things like the properties would need to be accurate and up to date, clear asking price is shown, basic property details like the size, property type, number of bedrooms and stuff like that. And you can see without these, there's basically no point in the user being there. So that's why they're the required change or the required gains.
Just on that, Lauren, just on that specific bit, when I've used the other profile, I never look at the expected side of this, because to me, that's not a gain, right? If I turn up and there's none of that, there's no gain there for me. It just should be there. So I spend my time looking at things that are truly going to push something beyond what that customer expects from that, or what you as a business can drive forward because of it. Mm-hmm. And the example I always use is from a real world scenario. Somebody said they always had stock out and their gain was having stock. That's not a gain, that's an expected thing, that if you run a production line for X, you will have the stock. The gain is being able to have enough stock to sell into a new market and open a new revenue stream. That is the gain from that. So think about that when you're looking at this, not just, oh yeah, we've satisfied what we expect. Your product's not going to be moving forward at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and like expected in general is just, you know, the standard things that they would assume are going to be there. Some of these could move into required as well. It just sort of depends on the person, but yeah, things like having clear professional photos of the properties, the ability to filter your searches, ability to contact the agent directly from the listing. So like without these, the experience wouldn't necessarily fall apart. But without these, it's the user's likely to go somewhere else anyway if these weren't there. It's things that they're going to expect to be there, and they're just going to go somewhere else likely if they aren't there. So yeah, those are your expected gains. And then we've got desired. So these are things that would be nice to have. Some users might expect them, but a lot of users would just assume that they're nice to have and they would improve the experience if they were present. So things like setting up your search alerts for relevant properties, being able to compare properties side by side, or like a 360 property tour that some of them do now as well. And then we've got your unexpected gains as well. So these are things that the user wouldn't even think to ask for really. And it's just sort of like the delightful little surprises in the experience for them. So maybe like a checklist for first-time buyers specifically. So that's just sort of showing that the website is specifically thinking about those types of users. Maybe a rough breakdown of additional costs, community support for first-time buyers, the ability to like message each other and get advice from people that have been through similar things. But it's so important to keep these up to date as well, because an unexpected gain can very quickly become desired or even expected. So the likes of a virtual or 360 property tour a few years ago, they would have definitely been in the unexpected category because they were very new. But as time goes on, they start to become desired. I was even contemplating putting them into expected because some users might not even view a property in real life without getting that virtual tour before. So you can see how important it is to keep these up to date, because very quickly something that's unexpected, the bar can be set by another company and suddenly the standard is different and you need to have it. So yeah.
I think that's a huge point, Lauren. Like, it's what your competitors are doing as well, right? I bank with Monzo and I expect everything to be as seamless as opening an account in Monzo these days, and it isn't, right? So like the fact that I can open a bank account in minutes quite quickly from somebody like that, you go to somewhere else and I can't bank in the same way with them. So my expectations being raised by somebody else, and I've started to come away from other competitors because of that. So you've got to keep that eye on what they're doing as well, or what the new features are of a new product that might be coming in, just because it does really impact that. And if you think, for this example, we had a chat about this the other day, right? But COVID really started to drive some of that forward because you couldn't go and see them. So expected behavior was determined by external outcomes rather than what was actually going on in your own product world.
Yep, exactly. All these like innovative companies coming up with the new features, and then you got to keep up to date with them, setting the standard. So yeah, the last one then is the pains. So this is broken up into your obstacles, risks, and then undesired outcomes. So your obstacles are sort of things that are actively blocking them right now as they're using the site. So things like your listings are outdated, confusing language or terminology. Maybe they're overwhelmed with what's on offer. And you can sort of see as well why segmentation is so important as well, because if this was not a first-time buyer and this was, say, like an estate agent or someone who's moved house loads and loads of times, these pains are going to be very different. They wouldn't likely be confused by the language or terminology or be overwhelmed with what's on offer, because that's, if it is the estate agent, that's their full-time job. But for a first-time buyer, those pains are going to be very different. And then yeah, a couple of others there. So maybe they're unsure of what offer to put in, long lead time to contract as well. And then the next one is your risks. So these are sort of things that can go wrong later if they're not sort of addressed now. So things like missing out on a good property because they were maybe too slow, especially as a first-time buyer. They don't know how quick you need to be with these things. Maybe there was issues found on the property survey, can't afford to live in their desired area. And then the last one then is your undesired outcomes. So these are sort of worst case scenario for your customers, and things that they're just trying to hopefully avoid altogether. So ending up in a home that they aren't happy with or doesn't fit their needs. Maybe their offer gets rejected, or there's just delays in their chain. So yeah, you can sort of start to see how the customer profile can be like a nice natural starting point of how you might look for opportunities, of like how you can make your user's journey a little bit easier as you're finding out more about them. But then obviously before you build anything, you need to test whether the idea is right, because again, this is going to be filled with many assumptions. Some of these have been brought down from the customer journey map as well, so you might recognize some of them. But yeah, these things will need to be tested and validating that these are real problems if they are just assumptions. And yeah, Renata is going to bring you guys through the test and learn card now, of like how you would actually go through and test some of these things. But yeah, anything else to add before we move on to the next wee bit?
I was just going to say, can people see how that starts to build the empathy and understanding of the customer from that? And how you start to say some of them might be assumptions, so you have to back them up that data piece, because you can speak to one person who might be the loudest voice and suddenly you're running with that as a problem. Actually, it's a problem for one person in that entire thing. So you go in, do your research again, you back it up with the data, you do your product analytics, and then you go on, you're testing out those assumptions to make sure they're correct. The other thing when you're doing this, and Lauren's done an absolutely fantastic job there, the reason we cover things up, and think about this when you're trying to tell a story, because we're trying to keep your attention on a certain bit of it. What happens is when we do this with clients, as soon as you put a board up, if it's not covered up, they start to wander on different things, and then conversation wanders. You can control a good storytelling and narrative by being able to step through it and hide what you don't want to see yet and only reveal it at the time. And I've done this with a number of things. It really helps to control that room. If you're sitting in a big room full of 20, 30 people, everybody's got an opinion, right? They see something on the board and suddenly you're there. You want to step through it in a logical way and have good discussions. So hiding things is a really good way to do things in Miro and other places like that. So there's a little tip. Any questions from any of that? You're very quiet today. I never like quiet, so.
No questions, just listening to the story and how it all comes together.
Does it make sense? Could you see yourself using something like this for some of the things you do, possibly?
Yes. Yeah, it's similar to what I've looked at in the past with experience management and how you look at perception and what becomes expected versus, you know, what was always a nice to have or seen as a fantastic thing, a reason people bought things in the past. As you say, once it collectively starts to happen, then becomes an expectation, and it sort of takes you back again, and you have to start to think about what's the desire going forward from there. So it's good to see how it maps to that as well. I think.
And this builds into how you manage a backlog in terms of how the percentage you spend on innovation based off what your customers are trying to do and how you try and move the product, what you're working on as a percentage of the general expected features or parity to keep up with that. And you can help structure your backlog from these sort of ideas as well. So it really works in that sense.
Yeah.
And it's just a great visual to get people on board on the same place, right? Because, I mean, you've probably all sat there and heard somebody from the top or somebody come up with a great idea that we're going to do, and there's not really much behind it and no real customer research, but we are going to go and make that go live. And this really helps, especially when you link it with what Renata's about to talk about, because we go and actually test that assumption and make sure that it's at least leading us the way we think it is. Because the amount of times it doesn't, and you just would waste time. So this is something to really help control, again, people's we should go and do something just because, especially if you work in a company that just has money, right? There's a few of them out there where money's not an object. I'll go and do that. 3 years later, you're still trying to get it live, right?
Yep.
Renata, over to you if there's no more questions on that.
Okay, great. Okay, so I will take everyone through the test and learn card. Again, we'll do a quick overview and then we'll go through a example and the template. So the test and learn card, it's a canvas used to design experiments and then record your results, learnings, and what steps you will take based off of the evidence that you found when testing new ideas or products. So it is a single place where the whole experiment is planned out, where it lives from, you know, your hypothesis to your final decision. So what actions will you take based off of your evidence? So ideally, you'll validate an idea before you invest in building it, and it protects you from spending time, you know, building a feature that you don't necessarily need or not all of it. So you really, all the decisions you take are based off of, you know, the evidence you find. So you'll capture your hypothesis and you'll document your test steps from start to finish. You will set specific metrics that you'll be recording, so what you're going to be measuring, and then your acceptance criteria up front. So that just means the results or threshold that will define a successful outcome for your project, or not project, but yeah, maybe project, product, feature, any of that. So it will increase your knowledge and de-risk ideas and help solve, the question. So is this problem worth solving? Does it actually work? Should we proceed to the next step? So I think it protects you from solving a problem that maybe customers don't have. So if you don't have, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't have a clearly defined customer profile beforehand, you don't really know what pains or problems you can realistically help with. So, you risk starting from the solution instead of the problem. So this is a great way to kind of test those things.
I think,
and then
Renata, just on that one though, it also helps you correct your own bias.
Yeah.
We've all been around this for a while, right? And you come in going, I know this, I've seen it before. We might have not seen this before, so it helps us check ourselves as well to make sure we're not just doing the same as other people do, right? And go, I've built that somewhere else, I'll build the same thing here. And just take that step back, take a breath, and move on with it with some data and evidence again.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah, no, thanks. So yeah, you're replacing your opinion through with data through increasing levels of evidence. So again, just what Matt said, you have your bias. You think something's going to work out because you've seen it. Maybe it on a, if it's a feature on an app, you've seen it work somewhere else. So you're like, oh, it'll definitely work, but you're not really looking at it through evidence-based. It's just kind of an assumption. And then with the results, you take action. So you decide whether, you proceed with next steps. You pivot, maybe you change a few things based on what you learned, run a different experiment. You park the idea. So maybe it's the right insight, wrong time, or stop entirely. So every action you'll have has some value. So even the stop is valuable because your insights maybe that you gathered can feed something else. So this is kind of just an overview of what a test and learn card, and now I'll walk you through the best practices. So first of all, you'll have to start with the hypothesis in any experiment. So just a clearly defined assumption tied to a customer problem that you have found maybe already in your customer profile. And then the outcome you expect. You want to be quite clear in the hypothesis. So it's trying to find the right words, but you don't want to go too broad in your hypothesis. You don't want to test exactly. You want to be specific enough where your insights will be valuable to any extent. So that will make sense when we walk through the example as well. So another tip here is to write the hypothesis like it will succeed and test it like it will fail. So you want to write something kind of foolproof that, test it enough times and the whole way around so that, your insights are actually valuable going forward. Matt, do you want to add anything to that? I know we talked about it before.
I think you're absolutely bang on there. It's you've got to believe in that hypothesis, right? And again, we do this with customers, but there's some very vague words and things. They'll talk about something and say, "Oh, the things," or that will change. Well, what's that, right? How do I know what I'm measuring if the words are vague? Like, I want a specific, and you want to keep it down to 1-2 things so you know what that is. If you've got a whole load of words and you pass it to somebody and they start questioning it, the writing isn't clear enough to test that hypothesis.
Yeah.
Sam, do you have a? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Nope. Go, Sam.
Oh, okay, cool. So, yeah, basically be as optimistic as possible when you're writing the hypothesis, and then you attack it from every angle because you want your product to succeed. So you have to kind of probe it from every angle and, record those metrics. So that brings me to the next point. So your experiment. So you'll document how you'll execute step by step and how you'll measure it. So you would have maybe 1 to 3 metrics that you'll measure that will, give you the insight that you are looking for, because you can test for many, many metrics that won't necessarily help you answer the question that you have. You can also run multiple experiments for a single hypothesis, so testing multiple problems or areas. Again, just if you have one set variable, you are able to test different outcomes. So if you have 3 metrics that will give you different insights but lead to the same answer, or maybe you have a few different answers, you can tweak your next experiment to fit those answers. And that will, again, make sense more when I walk everyone through the test and learn card. Next, you have your success criteria. So this is the pass-fail threshold that defines success. So this is something you want to lock in before you start the experiment. So this also has to be quite specific. You want to make sure, you're set in this. I think it's quite common to want to change it, saying, if we set that there's certain behavior change would change by maybe 30%, and we only really see 15% change, it's not really valuable to go back and say, well, let's just change it to 15% and then it's successful. You want to actually see why it wasn't the 30% versus the 15%. That's valuable information as well. So the insights and actions. So this is what the evidence shows, what you learned, and the decision that drives it. So again, continue, pivot, park, or stop. So if you don't have your success criteria locked in, the insights and actions you take will also be kind of muddled. So every action should be traceable to the evidence you found. Okay, great. And then
just on that, Renata, right?
Yes.
When we say evidence, we're not expecting you to prove everything. We're expecting you to prove enough to go to the next step. So one of the places I've worked where we're coaching, we talk about levels of evidence. I don't need you to turn around and show you're going to pull in £1 million by next month. I need to know that there's potentially a market there to start that process to take to the next level, and maybe run some other advertising or create some sort of POC or something like that. I don't need everything. I just need enough to say we're heading the right direction.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so top tips. Number 1 is start small. Small is very relative to your project, your organization, your product, your feature. But you want to test the smallest chunk that proves you're heading in the right way. And thin slicing your project down to the smallest, testable piece. So you wouldn't test a whole app at once. You'd release maybe a few features and build from there. So this is very valuable because it could tell you could save a lot of time. If you launch a whole app and you put, so much money in, so many hours, and it doesn't work because of certain things, that's become a waste. If you start smaller, and you can start building from there and see what steps to take. I was even thinking about it earlier, but if you look at how Instagram started, maybe not a few years ago, it's 20 or something, not 20, I don't know, 15 years ago, the whole thing looked different. And slowly they've launched features that have like streamlined. Maybe not everyone loves every feature, but now, I couldn't think of, Instagram Reels 10 years ago, but now it's like very common. And they've taken, what the competitors done. So TikTok is only videos, and they've implemented that. So it's become more evolved. But if they launch the whole thing, it's too confusing for a person to figure out right off the bat. So that's just an example of like start small. Next is to keep it clean. So start with a clearly defined hypothesis. You want to isolate one variable. So don't test, multiple things at multiple times, because it will maybe potentially muddle the results. And they start pointing in different directions. You're left unsure how to proceed. So keeping it clean, one variable, just keeps the findings interpretable. And then track 1 to 3 metrics and lock in your success criteria. So fewer metrics, kind of keep it sharper and not as noisy. And lastly, just expect to learn, not to win. So if you're going in and every experiment that you're running is passing, maybe you're not pushing hard enough. So an invalidated hypothesis, it still moves you forward. So even if you fail, you will have actions to take from what your evidence says. You will learn something, and it will be valuable, depending on the lens through which you see it, but you will be able to save time, money, for sure, if your hypothesis fails. But if it succeeds, then you know you're on the right path. So either way, there is a way to learn from it. Matt, anything to add there?
Just a couple of things for that, because say this is absolutely bang on, right? We went to Mind the Product, and Professor Brian Cox came out with a brilliant quote saying that you shouldn't want to be right, you should want to know. And this is a perfect example of this, right? People in business sometimes just want to be right. It's that power trip and everything else. You should want to know what's actually happening, and this is a good way of doing that, to prove it with some of the data and not just be there to say, oh yeah, I did this. And this brings me on to one of the examples in a previous client where it was that sort of thing. We're told that, yeah, we're going to do this sub product, the customers want it, there's a problem there, all of that sort of thing. And this went on for ages. And as soon as I got in, I started to do a test and learn card for them for this hypothesis. They said, can't do it without building it. I spat something out in an Excel spreadsheet. We put it in front of 10 customers, and that was it. And not one of them said it was any good or any better than what they have in Excel themselves. And they wanted to build something that would have cost 100 grand a month for 6 months of a team to do that. We killed the idea like that because of evidence from a customer. Not one even leading metric that would say any of what we were about to do was better than that. And that's how powerful this can be. And it stopped the conversation, which also stops all the noise that goes around that every time you try and do the thing you're meant to be doing. So that's the power that this can actually bring from a single page and creating a really quick, down and dirty experiment.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Yep.
All right, so this is the template we have for our test and learn card. So on the left side, we have the test experiment side. On the right, we have the learning card. So what we've learned from it, our insights, and then the actions we'll take. So if we look at the previous example that Lauren walked us through, first time home buyer, and we look at the pains, we thought maybe a solution to one of those could be a home buyer pack. So how helpful a home buyer pack would be. But again, that's too broad. So we have to narrow it down for a hypothesis. So we said, providing a buyer's info pack on each listing, bringing forward local authority searches, survey and environmental searches, will decrease buying completion time by 30% on a current 6-month baseline. So this is what I mean when you could get very specific in your hypothesis and even have your success criteria right there in it. But this, depending on whether this fails or not, we'll take actions on that. So the underlying assumptions for our hypothesis are, so first, desirability. First-time buyers want this information upfront and will engage with it. Feasibility, the pack can be assembled from information available at the listing stage and available as well on government listings. And viability, so surfacing it earlier reduces stalls or fall-throughs and speeds up the completion time, potentially also reducing waste costs. So that's what we assume will happen. But
just on that one, Renata, I've got an actual example for the underlying assumptions bit. Yeah. I've just completed a test and learn for an AI product or part of a product to try and help with backlog management and service and data and baselines for people to prioritize that. And one of the assumptions was they could find the data and everything else like that. What I didn't realize till we ran the experiment was they only have a certain number of credits a month and they top out quite quickly of that. So then even if the rest of the experiment would work, we would have had a different problem from that, because in most companies, I'd assume they could just use it like they could, and they hadn't capped them really low, so they wouldn't be able to query the backlog on a regular basis to get that back. So straight away, even I thought I'd had everything covered, something was missed there, and I learned that through this. So that was one of those sort of learnings. Sorry, not.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, sorry. So then step 2, describe your test. So what will you do to prove or disprove your hypothesis? So what we decided was we're going to add the buyer info pack to a limited set of listings in one region and one solicitor, and then compare on the baseline time for completion on data from listings sold in that region. It's important to keep, the test very specific in this sense. So the reason we chose to stay in that region is because, buying behavior will potentially look different if I say, let's maybe test how this would look in Belfast versus in London. So we can't really compare those results. I guess we can, but we won't really get anything valuable out of it. So keeping that very specific and your experiment specific as well would help.
I think on that,
yes.
Renata, the other bit is people will sometimes default to, I'll just do a certain number of that subset, right? I'll do 100 people. We had this conversation when we're filling this out as an example that if we did 100 people across the UK, you then have to go to every local authority and potentially solicitors that they deal with and everything to try and make this experiment work, rather than trying to partner with one specific area where they'll have one local authority, one estate agent that has one set of solicitors attached to it, so you can narrow it down to make sure it works. Where if we'd gone the other way with this, if you try to run this, you would fail quickly because there's too many things to try and control to try and run your experiment. But again, people always focus going, if my subset's like, I've got 1,000 customers, I'll do 100. Well, it might still fail because you're too broad in terms of what you're trying to test there.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we'll move on to metrics. So what metrics will you use to validate your hypothesis? You may just have one, you may have three, but again, shouldn't go past, I would say, 5 if you really need to. It would just get too muddy. But we decided we'll test one. So engagement with the info pack on listings that have it. So how many clicks it received, maybe how many people downloaded it, shared it, information like that. Next is whether buyers who use it will progress further. So from there, did they contact an agent, book a viewing, or move forward with an offer? And then finally, what our hypothesis is testing, so the overall completion to contract, how long that time takes. And then lastly, our success criteria, and it's in our hypothesis.
Just before you go there, Renata, I want to point out the conversation we had on this as well, right?
Yeah.
Do this with a few people, because I was on the line about it's reducing completion to that contract time, right? So bringing it down from the 3 to 6 months. Renata chimed in and said, but what about the people who decide to progress or not progress because of that as well? And I was like, that I hadn't thought about that as an offshoot for this, but I was down one path and that was what I was wanting to test. And from that, Renata came up with brilliant other metric and measure that we can look at going, do people stop or do they then continue to progress because of that as well? And it was quite an interesting view. So always have a number of people looking at this, because again, we normally have some sort of blinkers on based off biases, right? Like we said before. So get somebody go through it. Does it make sense? Do they have anything to add? Because we're all in different places, and randomly, even this for the 3 of us, because we're in 3 different locations, was really hard to do because we all have a different view of what that looks like. So get those people to chip in with this, question it, pull it to pieces. You'll have a better experiment at the end of it.
Yeah.
Sorry, not it was a good conversation.
No, absolutely, it is. And yeah, exactly. So one of the benefits I would think of measuring a few things is, so I'll finish it and then I'll go back to that actually. So the success criteria is, the completion timeline shortens, or the chain follow through drops by 30%. But if we measure, say, all these other stuff and our results show, the completion timeline only shortened by 15%. Yes, it means, our hypothesis was not proven, but that's still valuable. And we can say, if we track these other metrics, so whether buyers who use it progress further or not, say they did, more bookings, more viewings were booked, or more people contacted agents, or, took out mortgage, just things like that, then we would decide maybe 15% is enough, or maybe we change it for the next experiment. So now we'll add more of these home buyer packs, and then further down the line, it does increase, or, the time decrease. But having the various metrics will also help you in your interpretation of the results and what to do because, or what actions to take because of it. So yeah, we obviously did not run this experiment. So this section is where we would fill out if it ran, but you would first fill out your observations and results. So summarize the findings of your experiment here. This isn't really the time to interpret them, so just put the data, the numbers down here below. So the learning, so what you actually learned from the experiment. Now you can interpret, now you can see or write out what exactly your takeaways were. And then finally, the last one, your decisions and actions. So based on your learnings, state the decisions that you've made or the actions you'll take based off of this. So again, just very quick overview of the test and learn card. But yeah, I personally love research and experiments. So this was very helpful. And it's kind of a very like somewhat quick way to, get your information all together. So I'm just reading the chat.
Yeah, so that's a good question, right? The baselines, no matter where we work, right, with most people, the baseline's always the hardest thing to get. It without doubt, right? Because even going to a product team that say they're a product team, they might not have some of those data points, right? And again, you're trying to push out, and normally you're trying to push out across a value stream, which means department he has got some of them, somebody else has got them there, right? But you have to look inside your own products as well. So working on things like CRM product at the minute, that holds a lot of data, right? So start with what your product is to identify, say, the number of people or the number that fits, like, I don't know, guy, age, whatever, how many people in your product already do that, right? So there's a lot you already have to start and put together. Then from that, it's doing things like customer interviews, right? So start and reach out to a number of people, interview them, start to ask them about these things, and you're going to get some anecdotal evidence, but you're starting to point towards that. And you start to build it, but there's no one place for a baseline, right? And that's the hardest part of what we do as product managers. It's always somewhere else, and especially depending on where you are in that value stream, it might be the next step up that value stream and close to the customer that has some of that data. It's never going to be perfect, but having something is better than nothing, because a lot of the places go, and we're working with a customer at the minute who's doing the same thing, be like, oh, the success is this. Well, how do you know? Because you don't know how long it takes you to do that activity now. Go and measure it, go and sit in Gemba, basically go and have a look, time how long it takes to do that, right? Very rudimentary things, but you can get some idea and go, right, it takes that long to do that process. That process in the system happens this many times. This many people do it on average. You're starting to get some sort of number. You're going to have to keep iterating over that with the learnings and everything else, but it's a starting point. Does that answer your question, Karina?
Yeah, so would you expect to do your own research first? Read some literature, let's say you want to build an app for the estate agents. Would you be discussing it with someone external before you even put a baseline?
So I'm going to give you the brilliant consulting answer of it depends, right? It very much depends on your product, because for this example, right, there's a lot of data in the government space about how many homes are sold, where, potentially how long it took, right? So I can go to what's maybe available already online in places, like for some of those bits, I think it's Office of National Statistics, right? Other things are going to be closer. If you've got a proprietary product, you're not going to have the same data out there. So you're going to have to look in your product first, then in your wider company, then speak to your customers and make a gauge of where you think that's going. And some things, right, if you are truly inventing something completely brand new, that's, I mean, how many times we do that these days, but that's going to be hard. You're going to have to try and get an assessment of that market, which are normally massively out, right? When you look at everything from total addressable market, trying to get down to who it is. But then it's a timing thing, right? Based off things like your customer journey map. How long do we think it takes that? And you can start and ask people, if you're speaking to your customers, how long is it taking you to do X activity each day or month or whenever? And you can start and just do some basic calculations from there. But yeah, it's a hard one. So it depends on that product, how long it's been there for. If you've got a product in a massive enterprise, it might actually be 4 products you're trying to pull together into one new product that you're migrating it to. Now you're starting to see differences in what data is there, but it's still better than not having anything, because how do you know you've been successful if you don't have something to point to at the start? And that's
I'm doing great compared to what
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
and but people sign up, be like, oh, I've run it. Well, it proves nothing, right? Like I say, if I move the needle 5% or I moved it 20%, even that is a some sort of thing I want to understand, right? It might not be massive, but at least it gives me directional input to make a decision from that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Because I know we're getting the time.
Sorry, before we move on to more questions, if people just fill out this feedback form quickly, it's like 2 minutes, but we really love to hear back from you guys.
Truly
And
2 minutes.
yeah.
And while you're doing that, any questions? Has this been useful? Can people see themselves using some of this, taking it away and doing it?
Yeah, as someone who's not familiar with this space, it's been really helpful to walk through and have a practical example that's somewhat, relatable to. Is really, really good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's a hard. We keep trying to get those examples, and we sit and, like I say, we're talking about these, we're arguing about how we're going to like put this bit down, because it's trying to get something that relates to people across the world in different scenarios, right? So they might seem silly at the time.
Yeah, it was a bit harder for me filling it out because I've never bought a house. So I don't really, or Lauren and I were going back and forth. We're like, this must be, a problem people face, but we haven't gone there yet. But Matt was very helpful with that too.
I tell you the biggest revelation, I was talking about Rightmove like everybody knew it, and Lauren has a completely different thing in Northern Ireland. So there was no like, but again, right, these are things you find out just in your own group, and it aligns you as a business on the way you view things, which is another thing that's brilliant about this sort of stuff, that everybody's going to have a different view, but you start to go, like I say, I hadn't thought about something or not. I said, I hadn't realized that. I said, Lauren had no idea what I was on about when I was talking about Rightmove compared to We Love Property or whatever it was in Northern Ireland. So yeah, it was really, even for us, it was a great exercise to fill these out. So, but they are, honestly, I've used these a number of times and they are brilliant to try and either shut things down that annoys, or to prove why we should be doing something, or to pivot that and go, it wasn't quite there, let's do this. And one of mine at the minute, like I said, the AI experiment, we found the underlying data structures were wrong. The AI itself was really good. The data was incorrect. So we're going back now and pivoting to try and do work to amend data structures instead of that, to get better answers out the AI, and we'll run it again after that.
And I
Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really useful to see it as a story as well, because it helps you go through the process. So yeah, it's really useful.
This is a big thing for product management, right? It is storytelling. You are trying to get a whole load of different stakeholders on the same page with the same vision, understand why you've taken X over Y, why you've said no to their things, capacity, everything else. We have to be able to tell a good story. And when you can stand and point to things and show research and data, and you're not just standing there going, I believe this because I'm the PM, it brings more credibility to what we do. And say it stops people challenging you just because they're politically in the business, that person. Well, go and prove it then. And it really does help. It's a fortune.
Do you use user stories when you talk to your customers, or do you sort of teach them how to express what they would like as a user story?
I prefer asking them questions, right, in terms of around that thing, because if I use a user story, and it depends on what you're talking about, because features, I talk about features more because I'm trying to create a higher level roadmap with them and take a business route. Those user stories get very detailed fast. I'm still trying to know that is the right way of doing something.
The gauging style, okay.
And again, I'm asking them questions to go back all the time to what is the problem I am trying to solve, not what is the solution you want me to put in, because they're sometimes very different things. And even in businesses, we're sitting in one now where they're led by markets going, this is what I want the system to do. I want the box here. I want to do that. Well, actually, we're looking at this across the world. Give me your problem, because 10 other countries might have that, and I might come up with a better solution. And that's what I always go back to. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? Again, that problem space of the customer profile in the customer journey map, all of those sort of things. And then I go back to my team and say, right, give me like 3 or 4 solutions for this, if you can just do it. Because as product managers, we can just do some things, right? The system will take it. Other things is, I need to go and experiment because I've got an idea, but I don't know whether it's going to work. Or does it truly need to be an end-to-end, fully blown solution? Can it be something down and dirty that gets the value of the customer, and then we move on?
Amazing.
Any other questions? Steph, you're quiet. Do you have any questions?
No questions. Very interesting though. Thank you very much.
Perfect. And Lauren, these are all on our website, aren't they? Like the customer
Yes.
profile and that sort of thing.
Yep, we've got customer profile in the test and learn card. I'll add it into the chat here, because there's a few others up there if they're useful too.
So give that a click, go and download and try and find something that you can use it for. I would always encourage you after this to try and find an example you can run through that really brings it home more in your own world of what you're working on. But yeah, as I say, I've used these in a number of companies now, and they've either saved a lot of money or helped move the product forward, like in a decent direction, because of actually having something to talk about, the data and some sort of levels of evidence. Anybody for anything else? I realise we have taken 4 more minutes of your time at the minute.
Yeah. I'm running late for a call, but I do want to say thank you, everyone, because it's been really useful. Definitely.
Perfect. Get yourselves to the next one. We'll keep going with this.
Lovely. Thank you. Take care.
Have a good one, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.